I never thought I'd live long enough to see the day when the love of my life was lowered into the ground. The morning of the funeral felt heavy before it even began. The sky was gray, the kind of gray that makes the whole world seem muted, as if even the heavens knew what was about to happen. I walked slowly, each step heavier than the last, dressed in the black suit I had only worn for moments of loss. And now it was Margaret. My Margaret. I tried to hold myself together as the church bells rang, but every toll seemed to reach inside my chest and press against my heart. I watched them wheel her casket down the aisle, polished wood shining under the dim light of the chandeliers, and I thought of the warmth that wood now concealed. I thought of her laughter, the way she'd hum when she cooked, the way she'd place her hand on mine when I was worried. But now, all of that was gone, sealed away forever. I stood in silence, surrounded by family and friends, yet I felt alone. My eyes drifted across the pews, catching glimpses of familiar faces, neighbors, cousins, old friends who had come to say their final goodbye. But my gaze always found its way back to one person, my daughter, Emily. She sat with her husband, Daniel, her posture straight, her face carefully composed. She wore the mask of mourning, but I know my daughter too well. Her eyes weren't swollen from tears. Her hands didn't tremble with grief. No, her gaze was sharp, calculated, as though she was waiting for the service to end so she could move on to business. That realization cut me deeper than the funeral itself. When the service was over, people began to whisper their condolences. Soft words I barely registered. My ears were ringing with silence until Emily's voice sliced through it like a knife. She stood tall, smoothed her dress, and with a tone so cold it chilled me, she declared, "Now that Mother's gone, everything comes to me." There it was. No hesitation, no respect for the moment, no pause to honor the woman whose body hadn't even touched the soil yet. She claimed it all, in front of everyone, relatives, neighbors, even the pastor still lingering near the altar. My heart sank. I stared at her, not with anger at first, but with disbelief. This was the little girl I once carried on my shoulders, the one I taught to ride a bike, the one who used to slip her tiny hand into mine when crossing the street. But that little girl was gone. In her place was a woman with hunger in her eyes. For a moment, I wanted to say something, but my words caught in my throat. Then, before I could respond, a voice stronger than mine broke the silence. The lawyer, Mr. Jacobs, a longtime friend of Margaret's and ours, cleared his throat and said firmly, "Not so fast." The room shifted. Emily's confidence faltered, just for a flicker of a second, before she regained her composure. But in that instant, I knew the storm Margaret had warned me about had finally arrived. In the quiet that followed, my mind drifted back to the life Margaret and I had built together. Memories flooded in our first meeting, our early struggles, the home we worked so hard to build. I remembered the way she'd smile when Emily was little, how she would hold our daughter against her chest and hum softly, promising her the world. And I remembered the fear she confessed to me late at night, long before illness took her, when she whispered that Emily's hunger for more would one day bring us pain. Margaret always had foresight. She saw storms before the first drop of rain. I should have listened more carefully. But now, with her gone, I would have to face the storm alone. When I think back to the beginning, to when Margaret and I first met, it almost feels like another life. I was a young man then, not yet hardened by the weight of years, not yet bent under the burdens that life lays on every man's shoulders. I met her in a small bookstore downtown. I remember I was fumbling around in the history section, pretending to know what I was looking for, when she appeared like a sudden flame. She had a book already in her hands, and without hesitation she handed it to me. "If you want truth," she said, "start here." That was Margaret, direct, certain, filled with a light that demanded to be followed. I did follow her for over 40 years. Through good days and bad, through hardship and comfort. Together we built a life, not perfect, but ours. Emily came along a few years later. I will never forget holding her for the first time. She was so small, so fragile, but she filled my arms as though she had been meant for them all along. Margaret glowed when she held her, humming lullabies in the dim light of our bedroom, stroking her hair, whispering promises of love and safety. In those early years, we were a family whole and complete. Emily was a curious child, always asking questions, always tugging at my sleeve for answers. She wanted to know why the sky was blue, why leaves changed color, why birds sang at dawn. I did my best to explain, and when my knowledge failed me, I invented answers, spinning stories that made her laugh. Margaret would watch us with a smile, shaking her head at my tall tales, but never spoiling the fun. But as Emily grew, so too did her wants. It began innocently enough: an extra toy, a nicer dress, little things most children ask for. But over time, it became clear that what she wanted was not just things, but more. More than what we gave, more than what others had. Margaret saw it before I did. She worried that we spoiled her, that in trying to give her a better life than we had known, we had planted in her a seed of greed. I brushed it off. I told Margaret that children are children, that Emily would outgrow her demands, that love was enough to guide her right. But Margaret was not so easily fooled. I remember Emily's 15th birthday. Margaret had spent the entire day preparing baking her favorite cake, decorating the dining room, inviting Emily's closest friends. When Emily walked in, instead of joy, her first words were, "Why didn't you order the cake from the fancy bakery? Everyone else's parents do." I watched Margaret's smile falter, just for a moment, before she forced it back, brushing away the hurt. I stayed silent that day, but inside I felt something break. Then came the years of dating, the boyfriends she brought home, the endless comparisons to other families. Their house is bigger, their vacations are better, their cars are newer. Each word felt like a thorn, but Margaret bore it with patience. When Emily introduced us to Daniel, I saw a man with charm. He was polite, well-spoken, even likable on the surface. But Margaret's eyes narrowed. She had a way of seeing deeper, of catching the shadows that others missed. Later that night, she whispered to me, "He's watching us, John, not as people, as an opportunity." I dismissed her concerns, eager to see Emily happy. But time proved her right. Daniel encouraged Emily's hunger. Where Margaret and I had tried to teach gratitude, he fed her desire for more. And Emily, blinded by love, perhaps by her own reflection in him, followed eagerly. Margaret confided in me one night when the house was still and Emily had long since moved out. Her voice was quiet, but steady. "If Emily ever turns against us," she said, "promise me you will be strong. Promise me you won't let her strip away what we built." I remember holding her hand, reassuring her, telling her Emily was our daughter, that she would never truly turn her back on us. Margaret only shook her head. "You don't see it, John, but I do. One day she will choose. And when she does, it will not be love she chooses. It will be what she can take." Her words have haunted me ever since. Now, sitting here after the funeral, I know Margaret was right. She saw what I refused to see. Emily's claim at the funeral, spoken without a shred of hesitation, proved it. Margaret's foresight had been her last gift, her final shield for me. The will she left behind was no accident. It was carefully written, carefully planned, a message not just to protect me, but perhaps to teach Emily the lesson she had refused all her life to learn, that wisdom and dignity are worth more than wealth. But Emily would not see it that way. No, she would see only betrayal. She would fight, she would lash out, she would try to break me down. Margaret had known this, and now it was up to me to stand strong in the storm. Asterisk. The morning of the will reading came faster than I expected. The funeral had drained me, left me hollow, as though my very bones had been carved out. I wanted nothing more than to sit quietly with Margaret's memory, to hold on to her in silence. But instead, I found myself dressing in my old suit, tying a tie with trembling hands, and preparing to face the reckoning Margaret had left behind. The lawyer's office was an old, stately building downtown, the kind with heavy oak doors and floors that creaked under your feet. I had been there before, once or twice with Margaret, but never with this much weight pressing on my chest. Emily arrived with Daniel, both of them dressed not in mourning black, but in crisp, tailored outfits, as though they were attending a business deal rather than her mother's will reading. Emily gave me a curt nod, a half smile that did not reach her eyes. Daniel, ever the charmer, patted my shoulder and said, "Big day, John. Let's get this done right." The lawyer, Mr. Franklin, was an older man, silver-haired with sharp eyes that missed nothing. He greeted us formally, then motioned for us to sit around a long mahogany table. I sat at the head, as he instructed, though I felt no authority, only weariness. Emily and Daniel sat opposite me, their fingers laced together, their expressions poised but eager, as though they were already counting Margaret's treasures in their heads. Mr. Franklin cleared his throat, opened a thick folder, and began. "This is the last will and testament of Margaret Ann Williams," he read. His voice was steady, measured, the voice of a man who had done this many times before. It was signed and sealed 2 years prior to her passing. Present are her husband, John Williams, and her daughter, Emily Carter. Emily leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. She was ready. The will began with small matters: Margaret's jewelry, some family heirlooms, a few personal possessions. Emily received several items, pieces Margaret had chosen deliberately for her. But I noticed Emily's lips tighten. It wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. Then came the larger matters. "To my beloved husband, John," Mr. Franklin read, "I leave full ownership of our family home, with all rights and deeds attached. It was here we built our life together, and it is my wish that he may remain there in peace for as long as he chooses." Emily's eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. "Not yet," Mr. Franklin continued. "To my husband, John, I also leave controlling shares in the family business. He supported me from the beginning, and it is my will that he shall continue to have security in his later years." Daniel shifted in his seat, his jaw tightening. Emily's hand gripped his. Finally, Mr. Franklin paused, and in that silence, I felt the weight of Margaret's final words coming. "To my daughter, Emily," he read slowly, "I leave not money nor property, but something I believe she needs more time to reflect. My daughter, I love you, but I cannot reward your disregard for family, your neglect of respect, or your endless pursuit of wealth above love. My estate, save for a few chosen items, passes to my husband, John. I hope you will one day understand why." The words hit like thunder. Emily's face went pale, then flushed crimson. She shot to her feet, her chair scraping against the floor. "This is a lie," she shouted. "You forged this. Mother would never cut me out like this." Mr. Franklin remained calm, though his eyes sharpened. "This will was signed and notarized. I have witnesses. Your mother's wishes were clear." Daniel rose beside her, his voice low but dripping with venom. "Convenient, isn't it, John? Everything falls to you. How long have you been planning this?" I opened my mouth, but no words came. My heart pounded in my chest. I had not planned anything, Margaret had, but I could feel their eyes on me, accusing, condemning. Emily pointed a trembling finger at me. "You manipulated her. You poisoned her against me. I am her daughter. That house, that business, it should be mine." Her words pierced me deeper than she knew. For all my life, I had dreamed of harmony, of family standing together. And now, Here was my only child, looking at me as though I were her enemy. Mr. Franklin closed the folder with a decisive snap. The will is final. You may contest it if you wish, but I assure you, the documents are airtight. Margaret was of sound mind. Her wishes are clear. Emily's voice cracked as she shouted again. I will contest it. I will take you to court, Father. You'll see. I'll make sure you get nothing. With that, she stormed out, Daniel following close behind, his face dark with anger. The heavy oak door slammed shut, leaving me alone with Mr. Franklin. For a long while, neither of us spoke. Then softly he said, Your wife loved you very much, John. She wanted to protect you. I nodded, though my eyes blurred with tears. She also wanted to protect Emily, but Emily doesn't see it that way. He sighed. Sometimes love has to be firm. Perhaps one day, your daughter will understand. I left the office with the will secured, but my heart heavier than ever. I had what Margaret wanted me to have, but at what cost? My daughter's love? My family's peace? As I walked down the cold stone steps of the office, I wondered if I had just lost Emily forever. Asterisk, the days that followed the will reading were some of the hardest of my life. I thought burying Margaret would be the peak of my grief, but I soon realized grief doesn't stop with death. It keeps echoing, twisting, finding new ways to break you. And in my case, it took the shape of my own daughter. At first, there was silence. Emily didn't call, didn't visit, didn't even send a message. For a moment, I dared to hope she was cooling down, letting her anger burn out. But that hope was short-lived. The first blow came in the form of a letter-thick envelope, official seal. A lawsuit. My daughter, my own flesh and blood, contesting her mother's will. The words were clinical, filled with accusations of undue influence, manipulation, even fraud. They painted me as a villain, a schemer who had tricked my dying wife into cutting out her daughter. I sat at my kitchen table, the letter trembling in my hands, and felt a hollowness I can't fully describe. To see your own child put your name on paper, alongside words like dishonest and unfit, is something no parent should endure. But it didn't stop there. Soon after, whispers began to circle in town. I'd stopped by the market, and people who once greeted me warmly now looked away. Some muttered under their breath. Others gave me polite but guarded smiles. I could feel the shift, the doubt, the suspicion. Emily and Daniel had been busy. They spread their story far and wide. The grieving widow, tricked by a greedy husband, a father who had stolen from his own child. Daniel, with his silver tongue, was especially effective. He knew how to charm, how to twist words. He told neighbors, colleagues, even the pastor, that Margaret's will had been tampered with. That poor Emily, devoted daughter, had been robbed of her rightful inheritance. The worst part wasn't the gossip itself. It was knowing who started it. My daughter. My Emily. Nights were the hardest. I'd sit in the quiet house, Margaret's presence lingering in every corner, and wonder how it had come to this. I'd replay moments from Emily's childhood, searching for where I went wrong. Was it when I worked too many hours and missed one of her school plays? Was it when Margaret and I denied her something she wanted, thinking it was for her own good? Was there a single moment that planted this bitterness in her heart? Or was it many small moments, added together until love turned into resentment? Weeks passed, and the lawsuit loomed over me like a storm cloud. Mr. Franklin assured me the will was solid, that the court would uphold it. But reassurance didn't ease the ache inside me. This wasn't just about money or property. It was about my daughter declaring war on me. That one evening, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, Emily stood there, arms crossed, Daniel just behind her. She didn't wait for an invitation. She walked in, eyes scanning the house as though it already belonged to her. "Father," she said sharply, "this doesn't have to get ugly. Sign over the house, give me my share of the business, and I'll drop the lawsuit. We can end this quietly?" Her voice was firm, rehearsed, almost like a business negotiation. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I saw my little girl, the one who used to run to me after school with stories about her day. But that flicker vanished in the coldness of her stare. "I can't do that, Emily," I said softly. "These were your mother's wishes. She wanted me to have peace, not more battles. Asterisk?" Her face twisted. "Peace for you, maybe. But what about me? You've ruined me. Do you know what people are saying? That I'm greedy, ungrateful, that I was left with nothing. Do you know how humiliating that is?" I tried to reach her with words, but she wouldn't hear them. "Your mother loved you. Emily, this wasn't about punishment. It was about protecting you from yourself." Her voice rose, sharp as broken glass. "Protecting me? Or controlling me? Don't pretend this is noble, Father. You just wanted it all for yourself." Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder, his eyes narrowing at me. "Think carefully, John. You don't have many good years left. Do you really want to spend them fighting us? You'll lose. And even if you don't, you'll be alone." They left soon after, the sound of the door slamming echoing through the house. I sat in the silence, the words replaying in my head, "You'll be alone." They didn't understand. I was already alone. Margaret was gone. Emily was gone too, though in a different way. The lawsuit dragged on, each hearing another reminder of the chasm between us. Emily came to court dressed in sharp suits, her hair perfectly styled, her voice dripping with outrage as she painted herself as the wronged daughter. I sat quietly, listening, wondering if there was any part of her that still remembered me as her father. Through it all, Mr. Franklin remained steady. He presented the evidence, the signed documents, the witnesses who testified to Margaret's clarity of mind. Piece by piece, Emily's case unraveled. And yet, even as the truth stood firm, I couldn't celebrate. Because every word spoken in that courtroom was another brick in the wall between me and my daughter. When the judge finally ruled in my favor, upholding Margaret's will, I felt no victory, only sorrow. Emily stormed out, refusing to even glance in my direction. Daniel followed, his face a mask of fury. I was left standing in the courtroom, clutching the folder of documents, wondering if Margaret had been right to trust me with this burden. Protecting her wishes had cost me the last piece of family I had left, and deep down, I feared the battle wasn't over. Asterisk, you'd think that once the court ruled in my favor, the storm would finally pass. But storms don't just end with a verdict. They linger, leaving behind floods and wreckage you have to wade through, piece by piece. After the lawsuit, Emily cut me off completely. She didn't just stop speaking to me, she erased me. When I called her phone, she wouldn't answer. When I wrote letters, they were returned unopened. And worst of all, when I tried to see my grandchildren, the door was closed to me. The first time I walked up their driveway after the trial, clutching a small box of toys I'd saved from when Emily was young, Daniel opened the door. He didn't smile, didn't greet me. He just stood there, filling the doorway like a guard. "They don't need this," he said flatly, glancing at the box in my hands. "They don't need you filling their heads with lies." "Lies?" I asked, my voice breaking. "I only want to see them, Daniel. They're my grandchildren. They're Margaret's grandchildren." He shook his head slowly, almost pitying me. "Emily doesn't want you around. And as far as I'm concerned, neither do I go home. John, don't come back." He shut the door before I could say another word. I stood there in the cold, the box of toys heavy in my arms, and felt something inside me fracture. Margaret would have been heartbroken. Those children were innocent, caught in the middle of this poison, and yet they were being used as pawns. Word spread quickly after that. It wasn't enough for Emily and Daniel to shut me out. They wanted the whole world to turn its back on me too. At church, Old friends who once greeted me warmly now kept their distance. At the market, whispers followed me down the aisles. I could feel the shift. In their minds, maybe I had manipulated Margaret. Maybe I had stolen from my own daughter. The worst part was not being able to defend myself. Because what could I say? That my own child was lying about me? To outsiders, that just sounded like bitterness. So I stayed silent, carrying the weight of Margaret's will like a stone chained to my chest. Nights grew darker, lonelier. I'd sit by the window, staring out at the street, remembering Margaret's voice. She used to tell me, "John, dignity is the best armor we have. Let others throw stones, you just keep walking." I tried to hold on to those words, but some nights they slipped through my fingers like sand. Then one evening, after weeks of silence, I received a letter in the mail. No return address, but I knew the handwriting instantly. Emily's. I tore it open with trembling hands, praying it might be some kind of olive branch. But it wasn't. The letter was sharp, cold, filled with accusations. She wrote that I had ruined her life, that people looked at her differently because of me, that she had been humiliated by the will and the court. And then, the final line, "You are no longer my father. Do not try to contact me or my family again." I sat at the table with that letter in front of me, and for the first time in my long life, I wept openly, shoulders shaking, the house echoing with the sound of my grief. Because in that moment, it felt like I had lost everything, not just Margaret, but Emily too. The days blurred after that. I moved through them like a ghost, tending to the house, the garden, the small routines that kept me alive. But my spirit was fading. Every corner of the house whispered of Margaret. Every silence reminded me of Emily. And yet, in that darkness, something began to stir. A small, quiet flame. Because I realized something. Margaret had left me more than property, more than shares, more than money. She had left me her faith, her trust, her belief that I could stand tall, even when the world tried to knock me down. I remembered her words on one of her last nights. "Promise me, John, promise me you'll live with dignity. Don't let anger consume you. Don't let bitterness rot your soul. Let wisdom be your revenge." It was then I knew I couldn't give up. Not now. Not after everything. Emily had taken so much from me already. But she would not take my dignity. So I decided. If my daughter wanted me gone from her life, then I would step back. Not in defeat, but in strength. I would stop chasing after someone who no longer wanted me. I would live as Margaret wanted me to live. With quiet pride, with patience, with respect for myself. That night, I burned Emily's letter in the fireplace. Not out of anger, but out of release. The flames devoured the paper, curling it into ash. And with it went the last of my begging, the last of my desperate hope. I whispered into the fire, "I still love you, Emily, but I won't let you destroy me." And for the first time in months, I felt something shift inside me. Not peace, not yet, but a beginning. Asterisk, after I burned Emily's letter, something inside me shifted. For the first time since Margaret's passing, I stopped clinging to what was gone and started looking at what remained. I still had my home. I still had my health, though age tugged at me. And most importantly, I still had Margaret's voice inside me, reminding me that life wasn't over until I chose to let it be. At first, the change was small. I began to rise early again, tending to the garden Margaret loved. I pruned her roses, mended the fence, repainted the shutters. It wasn't just about the house, it was about reclaiming pieces of myself, restoring order where chaos had tried to take root. Neighbors began to notice. A few who had once whispered kept their distance, but others came forward quietly, offering small words of kindness. Mrs. Turner from across the street brought over fresh bread one afternoon. She said softly, I never believed the things they said about you. John, I knew Margaret too well. Those words, simple as they were, felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. I wasn't entirely alone. Then one day, I received a visit that surprised me. It was Mr. Franklin, the lawyer. He came not with papers or grim expressions, but with a smile. He sat at my kitchen table, sipping the tea I offered, and said, "John, I thought you should know. Emily and Daniel are facing some trouble of their own." It turned out the business Daniel had been running was faltering. He had made risky investments, borrowed money he couldn't pay back, and whispered promises he couldn't keep. Without Margaret's estate to bail him out, the cracks were beginning to show. Lawsuits, debts, angry partners slowly, the walls were closing in on them. I listened quietly, my heart heavy. Part of me wanted to feel satisfaction, to revel in the irony of it. But another part of me, deeper, quieter, just felt sorrow. Emily had chosen this path, blinded by greed, and now she was reaping the storm she had sown. Still, life has a way of balancing scales, whether we ask it to or not. A few weeks later, I was at the church, attending a small service. I hadn't been there much since the funeral, but something urged me to go that day. Afterward, as I stood outside, one of the parishioners approached me. He was a kind man, older than me even, who had known Margaret for years. "I need to tell you something, John," he said gently. "Margaret came to me not long before she passed. She was worried about Emily. She said, 'I fear my daughter loves money more than people. If I give her everything, it will destroy her. But if I hold it back, maybe one day she'll understand the value of love, not gold.' She wanted me to tell you, if ever you doubted her decision." I felt my knees weaken. Tears stung my eyes as I realized Margaret had been thinking not only of me, but of Emily too. She hadn't written her out of the will to punish her. She had done it in hope that one day Emily might wake up and see the truth. That knowledge gave me strength. It turned my sorrow into something steadier, resolve. Margaret had left me not just an inheritance, but a mission. To carry myself with dignity, to live well, to let time reveal the truth. And time, it seemed, was already working. Rumors began to reach me not of myself this time, but of Emily and Daniel. People were whispering about Daniel's debts, his failing ventures, the way he treated people in business. Invitations that once flowed toward Emily now dried up. The same neighbors who had looked at me with suspicion began to look at her with doubt. I did nothing to add to it. I spread no rumors, threw no stones. I simply lived my life quietly, just as Margaret had wanted. And slowly, without me lifting a finger, the tide turned. One afternoon, as I worked in the garden, I saw a figure at the end of the street. Emily. She stood there, watching me, her expression unreadable. For a long moment, she didn't move, and neither did I. Then, without a word, she turned and walked away. Doubt it wasn't reconciliation. Not yet. But it was something. A crack in the wall. That night, as I sat by the fireplace, I whispered to Margaret, "Your plan is working. She's hurting now, but maybe one day she'll understand. Maybe one day she'll find her way back." For the first time in a long while, I felt peace. Not complete, but enough to carry me forward. Because I realized the truth. Revenge wasn't mine to take. It was life's, it was time's, it was wisdom's. And Margaret had known it all along. Asterisk. It was nearly a year after Margaret's passing when the final chapter of this storm began to write itself. By then, I had grown used to the quiet. I tended to the house, the garden, the little routines that filled my days. I had stopped expecting calls, stopped waiting for letters. Life had become simple again, if not entirely whole. Then, one evening, as the sun sank low and painted the sky in shades of orange, there was a knock at my door. Slow, hesitant. Not like Daniel's heavy hand, not like a neighbor's friendly tap. Something in that knock carried uncertainty. When I opened the door, it was Emily. She stood there, thinner than before, her eyes tired, her clothes less polished. She looked older, weighed down not by years, but by burdens she couldn't shake off. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. "Father," she said at last, her voice softer than I had heard in years. I stepped aside without a word as she walked in. She glanced around the house as if seeing it for the first time, her gaze lingering on the photographs of Margaret that still adorned the walls. We sat at the kitchen table, the same place where Margaret and I had shared countless meals, where I had read her letter of love, where I had wept alone. Now I sat across from my daughter, waiting. Her hands trembled slightly as she spoke. "Daniel left," she said. "He walked out when the debts caught up. I thought we were a team, but he only stayed as long as there was money. When it was gone, so was he." I listened quietly, my heart heavy, not with anger, but with sorrow. She swallowed hard, eyes glistening. "I blamed you for everything. I told myself you tricked Mother, that you wanted to hurt me. But the truth is, she was right. I didn't love her the way I should have. I didn't love you the way I should have. I only thought about myself." Her voice cracked. "Now I've lost everything. My husband, my friends, my reputation, and all I have left is shame." For a long moment, the only sound was the ticking of the clock on the wall. Then, slowly, I reached across the table and placed my hand over hers. "You haven't lost everything," I said gently. "You still have a father who loves you, and a mother who believed you could change." Tears spilled down her cheeks as she bowed her head. "I don't deserve forgiveness." I shook my head. "Forgiveness isn't earned, Emily. It's given. And you have mine." She sobbed then, shoulders shaking, years of anger and bitterness pouring out of her like poison finally leaving the body. I sat with her, silent, steady, the way a father should. That night, for the first time since Margaret's funeral, I felt something I thought was gone forever: hope. Not certainty, not a promise of a perfect future, but hope. A fragile, flickering light that maybe, just maybe, the rift could heal. Time passed, and Emily began to visit more often. At first, cautiously, as if afraid the old bitterness would return. But slowly, she softened. She helped in the garden, sat with me by the fireplace, even smiled now, and then when we spoke of Margaret Dot, it wasn't easy. The past still lingered between us, like a scar that would never fully fade. But scars, I realized, are proof of healing. One afternoon, as we tended Margaret's roses, Emily looked at me and whispered, "I wish I could tell her I'm sorry." I placed a hand on her shoulder. "Live in a way that honors her, Emily. That will be your apology." She nodded, and I saw in her eyes a glimmer of the little girl I once knew. And so, life moved forward. Not perfectly, not without shadows, but forward. Dot, as I sit here now, speaking these words, I think of Margaret. I think of the wisdom she left behind, the way she guided us even from the grave. She knew what I didn't, that sometimes the greatest act of love is not giving someone everything they want, but giving them the chance to find who they truly are. Emily claimed it all at the funeral. She thought inheritance was measured in houses and money, in deeds and documents. But Margaret, in her wisdom, knew better. She left me the task of carrying her legacy with dignity. And she left Emily the hardest gift of all, the chance to learn what truly matters. Justice wasn't served in anger, nor in vengeance. It was served in time, in truth, in wisdom. And as I look out at the roses blooming in the garden, I can almost hear Margaret's voice on the breeze. "You did well, John. You held on. You stayed true." I close my eyes, and for the first time in a long while, I smiled, Dot, because in the end, The best revenge isn't triumph. The best revenge is living with dignity, love, and peace in your heart.